Alrighty. Well, I'm Victoria Smith, or Tori, and this is my literary history. I guess most of the time when I ask people about books, like as a child, they just kind of look at me funny. And I feel like a lot of people don't get the experience with books that I had with my family as a small child. Like my mom and my grandparents always read to me, and I always had books everywhere. My mom was always buying me books, and I was always asking for books. And from a really young age, I just really loved to read. Unfortunately, and I have a lot more bookshelves than this that you can't see, but unfortunately I don't have my actual copies of some of these books that I remembered as a child. So I'm just kind of gonna read off some and talk about them as I go along. So I think one of the ones that I remember the most is my grandfather getting me a copy of this book for like my 5th birthday, I believe, called The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. And I loved that book to pieces. Like, I don't think I could read it quite by myself yet, but it was always being read to me, and I was always giving it to people to read to me. And my copy that I have, which is actually at my parents' house, it's loved thoroughly. It has my crayon drawings all on the inside of it, and little, notes that don't make sense written on the pages. So I always have really just good feelings about that book. Let's see if another one. The Rainbow Fish by Marcus Pfister. I love the crud out of Rainbow Fish. It's one of those ones that unfortunately I don't have on my shelves to show you. But I was a really different kid. Like, I didn't have many friends, and I was really quiet, and I was kind of just a bookworm. And I remember my 1st grade teacher introducing me to this book, Miss Hill. And I came to her, and I remember talking to her, like, I'm too different. People don't like me because I'm different. And she gave me this book and said, Rainbow Fish is different too. And as you read through the book and you discover what it is about Rainbow Fish that's so different. I just remember thinking back and feeling better about myself, and not, I guess, hating myself for my difference from other people. Yeah. Another book is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie by Laura Numeroff. And I think a majority of people, even kids nowadays, are still reading these books. I know they have If You Throw a Pig a Party and those books now, and they're just fun, cute books. I just remember liking it a lot. As I got older, probably about maybe 5th grade, getting into middle school, my level of reading was getting a little better. So, and you read the Jenny B. Jones series by Barbara Park. Lots of people I know, we read those in school. Okay. I started going off on a tangent about books that I didn't have. And then I realized that I actually have a copy of one of my favorite childhood books. The Little Prince. It's a French book. I really can't remember who it was that introduced me to this book. But I believe I was in maybe the later grades of elementary school, maybe like 4th or 5th grade. And I think I just stumbled upon it. But I can't even begin to talk about the kind of impact this book has had on me, especially after picking it up after years and years and reading it again. I mean, I have literary tattoos. I have a tattoo from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and then I have a tattoo of the rose from this book. And I always just remember being obsessed. Like, the pictures really caught me, the watercolor, the story, because on the surface, it's just the story of a little prince, trying to find his home, but reading it as an adult, you realize there's so many things under the surface, and I really liked that about this book. And I mean, that's why I have a tattoo from it, because the rose in the book represents like watering your own garden, being yourself, coming to terms with who you are and not being afraid of it. And I think that image is really awesome. It's a good book. I'm sorry if there's a huge reduction in quality, but my camera just went boom. So I'm going to hopefully edit this well enough where it won't look completely retarded. So I'm just going to pick another book. Let's hear. We just went over the Book of Virtues. And so I think I'll do something a little different. One thing that grew, shook my laptop. One thing that grew as I got older was the discovery of poetry for me. I was used to reading novels and books, but Shakespeare in middle school was as close as I really got to poetry or appreciating poetry. As I developed, I started getting a huge obsession with writers like Edgar Allan Poe. There we go. A few of my other favorite poets is Walt Whitman. I have a complete collection of Shakespeare as well. And then I eventually, here's the dark taste coming out of me. I read a lot of Sylvia Plath, and other readers like her tend to be on the dark side. She writes a lot of poetry about depression and things like that. She wrote The Bell Jar, which I know a lot of people have read. I don't know. The darker stuff speaks to me. It's interesting. Let's see what else I got here. Oh, this goes over here. Oh, can't make it fit. Other things I picked up in middle school. I read a lot of the teen novels. And here's my inner middle school goth kid coming out. With books like Generation Dead by Daniel Waters. It's a series that was made about a boy who's a zombie. And I don't know, I just liked the supernatural books. I went through a whole like vampire, fairies, witches, those types of books. What else did I read? I guess going with something that's a little different. In middle school, I started picking up visual novels. So I started reading things like, let's try to pick one that's not terribly mature. Let's see. Oh, I guess this is a good example. I was obsessed with this book series in middle school called Vampire Kisses, and they made graphic novels for them, so like Japanese anime style comics, and I really loved the main character, and I wanted to be just like her, and like I dressed like this in middle school. I read a lot of Sarah Dresden books, so books like The Truth About Forever and Dreamland. And then I guess I'll start talking about the kind of stuff I read now. I'm still a huge fantasy person. I developed an intense love for Anne Rice. Love Anne Rice. Looks like I have one of her books right here. I have all of her Interview with a Vampire series. And then I have Belinda. She's a darker genre type writer. Then I really got into classics starting in high school. I have several copies of Hamlet up here, English Victorian anthologies of poetry, classics like Frankenstein, Moby Dick. What else can I see on my shelf? Pride and Prejudice, A Tale of Two Cities. And I really started getting into British literature in particular. Books like Wuthering Heights became my favorite. And so I guess now that we're on that topic, I need to talk about a really, really important book. So I'm gonna go get it, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, back again with more books. I think I'm having a little too much fun. Okay. So, I can say, without a doubt, that my favorite book in the entire world is Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. And when I say that to people, they get really upset. Like, all of the color just drains from their face, and they're like, why? And so I guess I'm gonna try to explain that. This book has a lot of meaning to me because it was given to me by my freshman and sophomore year English teacher. His name was Mr. Karanja. And we were reading this book in class, and it was at a time in my life where I was having a hard time. I went through a really big battle of severe depression and anxiety, and I went weeks without going to school, and at one point I developed an eating disorder. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of emotional. And for me, Mr. Karanja was the teacher that wouldn't let me get away with saying that I couldn't do something. Because I was so, I was just convinced I was stupid and I couldn't find my place or my worth or anything. And he was the person who said, Tori, you have a gift for writing. Tori, you should write, more creatively. I see you doing really good things on your projects. Who, encouraged me with summer reading lists and, break reading lists for Christmas and things like that. And he was one of the first adults to ever encourage me. And it was the first time in my life I felt like I could do something. Like I had a talent or a purpose. And so, speaking of talent and purpose, at the time we were reading this book, Great Expectations, in class, most people know it's about Pip and his journey while trying to improve himself because they have these great expectations of him. And this book means so much to me. I mean, because Mr. Karanja is basically the reason why I'm going to school to be an English teacher. Because to me, this book is just more than the story, because it applies to my life and I've applied it to my life. And my whole aspiration is to hopefully have the same kind of impact on a student one day, or hope that a book like this will have the kind of impact on a student that it had on me, or any type of book, So this one's definitely a big winner. Alright, and to end things on a far less serious note, I'm just going to kind of run through a couple of more things that I tend to read, or things that I've picked up recently. I recently picked up the Outlander series by Diana, and so far so good. I haven't finished the first one yet. I'm working on it. But it's very historical fiction, fantasy type thing, the type of series that I like to read. And you can't really see, but over there I have the entire Game of Thrones collection, so I've read all of those. A bunch of other series that I've read is not coming to mind right now. Dresden Files, another fantasy, magic, supernatural genre that I'm starting to get into, and there's tons of these books and they're really cheap, so I just buy tons of them and read them. And then I guess the last thing I should talk about is I normally only read novels for a really long time, and it's actually only a recent thing where I started picking up things that are not fiction novels, I should say, but things like memoirs, autobiographies, self-help books, things like that. Let me see if here we go. A couple months ago, I picked up I Am Malala, which is the story of a girl who stood up for education in the Middle East, and she ended up getting shot because of it by the Taliban. This was really, really important for a while, and if I remember correctly, I think she ended up winning some sort of peace prize or something like that. So I was like, yeah, I should check that out. And it's really, really good. Normally not the type of thing that I read, but I think this started getting me into reading things more like it. If anybody knows anything about me, it's that I love cats. I have my cat, which I'm surprised he's not in here trying to harass me right now. But I became obsessed with the show My Cat from Hell, and so I became obsessed with Jackson Galaxy and cat behavior and things like that. And so he wrote this, my camera just over there made weird sounds, but he wrote this book about how his cat helped him become sober and get over his bouts with depression through trying to train this cat who had been abused to, I guess, live more comfortably with him. And so it's really just useful for me as a cat owner, because it gives me little like training tips for like litter box training, teaching your cat not to like claw stuff. Okay, I'm gonna film this last part really fast because I forgot to talk about how it affects me as a teacher and how I'm going to use this in my classroom. So I talked a little bit about how some of the works affected my decision to become a teacher, and I did talk about what kind of teacher I wanted to be. Like, I want to be the kind of teacher that inspires their students to connect with these certain literary works, to find something that they just enjoy about it, because I feel like reading is such a chore for a lot of students, and I want it not to be. Like, I want it to be relevant to their interests and relevant to their lives and their feelings, things they may be concerned about. I want to provide them with literature that affects them in that way, because those are the books that helped me so much. As for what I'm going to do in the classroom, they're probably going to have to deal with a lot of fantasy, probably a lot of darker pieces. I like to put a large emphasis on poetry and those kinds of works, so lots of Shakespeare, lots of ghosts and witches and things like that, and also probably a lot of emotional journeys as well. There'll probably definitely be a heavy British influence, so that'll be there. It'll be a nice blend of things, I feel like, just because I feel like that's what you should do to keep your students' interest. And, well, that's about all I can come up with, and this video is running really long, so I'll go ahead and let you go.